Right, so good evening, councillors and member of the public, and welcome to the Secretary Central Cabinet. I have one apology for absence, and that's Councillor Lanny Shears. Okay. Declarations of interest. Minutes, pages 3 to 9. Do we approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of October? Agreed. Any questions? Agreed? Agreed. Lovely. No matters arising. I'm unaware of any written questions from the public or written questions from councillors or petitions. So let's move on to item 8, the forward plan, pages 10 to 21. Yes, John. Councillor Chancellor.
On page 21, Chair, it references the East Harlow Strategic Master Plan and expected date is to be confirmed. I simply say because this will clearly encompass Old Harlow, if the 3 ward councillors for Old Harlow could be kept abreast of the developments as it progresses, something like this, because it will have major implications for our ward, I'd be extremely grateful, and so would Councillor Livings and Councillor Garnett, who sit on planning and take an interest in these matters.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
So I think I'm just waiting for an answer to that question.
Yeah. Councillor Perch, do you want to answer that? There's no reason not to.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
So that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Okay.
I said yes.
Thanks.
You got a hearing report.
I haven't got hearing report.
I think if we can turn on our microphones, everybody will be happy.
Thank you, Joe. Just on page 20, there's a couple of new items popped up. The Epping Forest SAC mitigation strategy. Sounds absolutely fascinating, but what is it? And there's also something called stewardship arrangements. Perhaps if someone could enlighten us as to what those items are.
What page is that? 20. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, Chair. The Epping Forest mitigation strategy is to do with the effect of our developments for the Garden Town on Epping Forest in terms of sustainability and pollution. Obviously we're not directly involved, but we are included in the area that has to be the subject of the study. That the actual mitigation strategy is a document that's been prepared by Epping Forest in conjunction with the City of London Authority and the foresters who actually control Epping Forest.
Back in stewardship?
It's a similar, it's to do with the stewardship arrangements for the same problem.
I'm sorry, Councillor, you're going to have to help us on this.
Well, obviously we're building the Garden Town, which includes more than the developments within Harlow. And we, a part of the Garden Town's remit is to look at long-term arrangements for what will happen after the developments have been built. It's a word that you could use a lot of other words, but they're all attempting to address or describe the same process, which is how will the public assets of the new developments be managed into the future by the new communities. So stewardship is, you could say, is a strange word, but then any word, legacy control, any word you choose is equally going to be perhaps just as clumsy.
Yeah.
But that's what it's referring to.
Okay.
In some places that have been looked at and to see how other people have addressed this particular issue, there's all different forms of stewardship. Sometimes the developers set up a private company which then is owned by the community. Sometimes it's handing over to the local authority. There's different ways of doing it, and this report is going to address how it's going to be done. And the reason it's to be confirmed is that there's still a lot of consideration being given to it. It's not an urgent problem, but it's one that's got to be addressed before building starts.
Thank you.
So, any other questions? Do we note the forward plan? Noted. Okay. I've taken no recent decisions, nor is my deputy, as I was saying, my portfolio holders at night. So let's move on to item 10, agenda item 10, the creation of the HDS Housing and Remuneration Company, pages 22 to 46. I will move that.
And I will formally second that, Chair.
Thank you. Since 2001, in Harlow, as across the rest of the country, there's been a significant shift to private rented accommodation. In 2001, just 4% of Harlow residents lived in private rented accommodation. Now it's 26%. You may ask, well, why does that matter? Well, our statistics show that a worker living in private rented accommodation can be paying 50% of their income on accommodation costs. Yet the suggested affordability rate is 35%. Residents on benefits who can't find council accommodation are expected to find accommodation within the local housing allowance. But this hasn't kept up with market rents since 2010. In fact, it's been frozen since 2016. Now there's a large gap between the local housing allowance and actual rents. And this presents the people of Harlow living in private rented accommodation with difficulties finding and keeping accommodation, increasing insecurity and increasing risk of homelessness. So much of the private rented sector accommodation is unaffordable. Many private lets are made on a short-term basis. One of my daughter's best friends in her first 2 years at William Martin School was a daughter of a mum who was moved here from temporary accommodation in Canada to a private rented property. She wasn't keen on the move. She had no family here, no friends, no support network. After 2 years, when they were just starting to feel a part of the bushfare community, the landlord decided, as was her right, to sell up. She no longer wanted to rent property. It was a short-term tenancy, so they had very little time to find alternative accommodation and ended up on the other side of town, a 3-mile walk from William Martin School. They kept it up for a while, but eventually, inevitably perhaps, the little girl had to change school and the community support the family had started to rely on was gone again. So much of private rented accommodation is insecure. And thankfully, it's a very small proportion, but some private rented accommodation is squalid. Harlow needs more affordable houses, truly affordable housing, long-term secure tenancies at council levels of rent, so that families can bring up their children knowing that the school they start at will most probably be the one they finish at, offering a continuity along the educational pathway that we know produces better outcomes, able to pay their rent without fear of falling into arrears or trading off the cost of essentials versus rent, worried about the next knock on the door. Decent, secure and affordable housing is the ambition of this Labour-led council. HDS H&R will help us make a start with this, acting for the council as a development company, acquiring sites, commissioning building, eventually managing the rentals. HDS H&R will provide a platform for greater stewardship in place shaping. It will provide the council with greater freedoms and flexibilities to take innovative steps to meet local housing needs and meet one of the key priorities of our corporate plan 2017-2020, more and better housing. Attached to this report is the business plan promised for this cabinet, together with the necessary changes to the terms of reference for the shareholder subcommittee and a proposed pipeline of house building sites, detailed and painstaking pieces of work. So I'd like to finish by thanking the officers and the councillor who have worked so hard in producing it in a timely fashion.
Good.
questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Very interesting introduction. Just make the point which has been made many times in this chamber that no government has built enough houses in the last 30 years. And this has continued to deteriorate. My first question is, what is it the company is supposed to do as an activity?
Right, well, I suppose if you think of the ABC estates that were redeveloped for us, we had BCA, sorry, ABC, BCA. There was a development company, I forget the name of it, it was Countryside Estates, I think, that acted as the development company. They acquired the land through a deal with us. They then appointed planners and builders and building companies, and who created actually did the building for them. And HTS really fits in with that role that the Countryside did for us.
Thank you. So why does it actually say that in the business plan? You have to go to page 5 of the business plan.
What page on the agenda is that?
Page 31, 3.2 mission, to deliver mixed-use housing, maximising affordable homes, so on secure tenancies at council rents. But that's a plan. It doesn't say, it doesn't specify in the business plan how it's going to achieve that. So it's going to acquire land, that is mentioned. It's going to arrange for the building of houses. Now, is that on its own account or for the council? Is it building houses for council rent? Is it building houses for affordable rent? Is it building houses for sale? If it's going to be building houses for rent, is it going to become a registered social landlord? And is that registered social landlord going to be within the company?
Yes. I think the idea is that it has a flexible approach, and each project is dealt with on an individual basis. Our aspiration is to create as much truly affordable housing as we possibly can, given the constraints of the site and the cost of building.
I'm sorry, Joe, but you're not describing how it's going to do it. You're establishing a company which you will own indirectly to carry out certain tasks for you, and because it's a separate company, it can go away and do things of its own. But nowhere in here does it describe what its actual activity is. What is the company actually going to do?
The company is going to commission, as I think I said in my opening, it's going to commission the building of housing, with the emphasis being on truly affordable housing, and perhaps in the long term, manage that housing too. If you think that this draft document is lacking in detail, I'll happily take some of the comments on board. It is a draft.
So you say eventually manage houses, but what? Okay, you will instruct the company to go away and develop one of these sites in Appendix A or B, whatever it is. You'll use the software that you've already acquired to assist the company in deciding the mix of properties, having sold them the land at market value in the first place, having possibly lent them the money borrowed from the Public Works Loan Board, which is in there at a suitable premium. But nowhere in here where it says to commission. Well, how much of a development company is it going to be? How much discretion is it going to have to actually go away and decide what it wants to do, as opposed to what the council wants it to do? This is where I'm struggling to. I'm still coming onto this cold. I'm a potential partner or associate of HSH. I need to know what it is what it is the company is going to do, and what it may want me to do as a contractor or stakeholder. And that's not in this document. Yes, it's a draft, but it's a long way off being a business plan.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
I haven't finished. That's just the first couple of pages. Also, is it going to be a registered social landlord?
That hasn't been decided as yet.
Hasn't been decided.
No.
So, how is it going to manage social housing?
Well, I think initially we need to build the housing before we can even start to manage it, and that decision can be made at the appropriate time.
I'm sorry. If you don't know what you're going to do with the housing when you start building it, it's a bit late.
Councillor Carter, these are questions, and you're not asking questions at the moment.
I am. I'm asking, is it going to be an RSL?
And
You say you don't know.
and I think I answered it very clearly.
Is it going to build commercial properties?
That would depend on the viability of the schemes and what mix needs to be included in them.
We've provided you with a pipeline, and I don't think that pipeline includes any commercial properties, although, for example, elm hatches in there, and that may well have shop lets in that. It would depend on the viability of the scheme by scheme basis.
Where are the memorandum and articles of association and scheme of delegation?
So they've been drafted and are with the legal team, but they aren't incorporated in these documents for Cabinet this evening. But the outline of what's included in them is included in the report.
On paragraph 13,
Page.
sorry, page 24, it's the actual covering report. It says at the end there, the Office of the Task Group will assume responsibility for the development and delivery of each scheme subject to in-principle approval. Does that mean the in-house team will project manage the developments?
Again, that would be determined on the nature of the scheme. So the skill sets that are required on some schemes might be procured and brought into the council as appropriate, depending on the size and scale of the scheme involved.
Okay. Let's go back to the report, page 28, paragraph 118. It refers to uncertainty around current housing allocation priorities. I'm not quite sure what the impact on the company that will have.
So, just give the paragraph reference again.
118, page 28. It's the last sentence in that paragraph. Bearing in mind.
Yeah, I've found the paragraph now and I found the sentence. Can you just repeat the question again, please?
What is its relevance to the company?
From the point of view that if it was to take up the remit of a registered social landlord, the changes in right to buy allocations might in the future impact upon it, potentially.
Moving to paragraph 135 on the next page, there is a comment in there. Yes, it's about the middle. It's a long sentence, so I won't read it all out. Sentence begins: changes to goring rules around the HRA are fully detailed, blah, blah, blah. Support additional growth within the HRA created by removal of cap arrangements whilst maximising income for the general fund. Again, what is the relevance of that to the company?
So It's referencing the fact that the amount of investment and development that the HRA can undertake may be impacted by the cap arrangements and our ability to borrow, which will inevitably have an impact on our ability to finance the projects through the company.
Sorry, what is the phrase that's used there is whilst also maximising income for the general fund. I'm asking what is the relevance to the company? The company couldn't care less about the general fund and the HRA. It has its own account to run. So what's the impact on the company? Why does it need to be there?
Because it could be a restriction on what the council can commission from the company.
But, sorry, what is it to do with the general fund from what HCSPR is doing? I don't understand its relevance in the business plan.
Well, from the point of view that if the company was to make a profit on its developments, that profit would come back to the council as a dividend to the shareholder.
Well, true, but it doesn't follow from that sentence. Okay. 136, also on the same page, says the principle of the council borrowing at government-backed public sector loan rates and achieving a revenue margin through on-lending creates a reliable income source for the company. I'm not quite sure how borrowing through public sector borrowing is going to create an income stream for the company.
Maybe the wording could be revised, but effectively it means it gives a stable source of funding for the company to undertake the developments. So income might be the incorrect word to use.
So,
whereas if it was exposed to finance sector borrowing, it could be potentially significantly varying rates and uncertainty about whether it could secure that borrowing.
So it could be a source of capital.
Yes.
Right. But as I say, somebody, a stakeholder reading this cold, as I've been doing, they're going to be totally confused by that.
Well, Councillor, I hope they would read the words draft across it and accept that we're here to scrutinise this and make changes where necessary.
So I may continue.
Please.
2.4, which is paragraph, page 31, second dash point under regen and renegotiation. Says, our values demonstrate our commitment to our mission through the below, improve the quality of homes in the district. Sounds a very demanding vision for the company. It's certainly something for the council to pursue. Again, I'm not quite sure how much impact the company can actually do to deliver that.
Is there a question?
Well, yes. What is the impact on the company? The company isn't going to improve the quality of homes in the district, all the homes. Yes, it may be building a few, unless you want to start moving into private sector home improvements, which is not in the business plan.
No, I think there was some point there, Councillor Carter. If we have a company that is delivering high quality, affordable houses, and genuinely affordable houses, then we are, in effect, I suppose, adding an extra avenue that people can pursue housing through. And one would hope, and perhaps that's what's intended here, that would have a knock-on effect for the provision of private rented accommodation, who would now find that they are in competition more than perhaps they are at the moment, where perhaps at the moment they have somewhat a captive market.
So it's only new homes.
No, I don't think that's quite what I said, but we'll carry on.
I see the word stewardship comes up again, but I'll gloss over that. Paragraph 2.4, under values, it's on the next page, under leadership and accountability. About the middle of page 32. Dash point, value and reward open, honest communication. How is the company going to reward open communication? I don't understand that at all.
HTS already reward employees for open communication and honesty, so it will just be a follow-on of what they already do.
That bit must have passed me by.
Well, obviously not, Mr. Simon. As a
Through the
director,
chair,
you
you
should
don't
know, sorry, through the chair, sorry, you should know that obviously there are schemes already in place for HTS to evaluate and reward our employees. It has been from day one. Obviously it's convenient to be getting it, but that's just reinforcing their values that have always been in there from day one.
Moving on to page 34, stakeholders. On the third line, these include the company's shareholders, main client, current and future residents and business owners. I'm wondering how you're going to identify future residents. Could be anybody in England.
No, I've lost you. Can you give me the paragraph?
So have we all, Chair. So have we all.
Page 34.
Page,
Could you, now I've found it, if you could give me the, give me the
page
question again.
34, section 5, stakeholders. Third line down, these include the company's shareholder as the main client, current and future residents and business owners. I'm just wondering how the company, bearing in mind this is the company's business plan, is going to identify future residents, who could be anybody in England or even wider.
Well, we clearly can't identify every single one. However, we are hoping that the building of these houses will address our current housing needs register, so we do know who some of them will be. I'm going to stop you for a moment. Councillor Purdy.
Yeah, can I say, Chair, that this question of how you involve as stakeholders, future residents, is something that everybody faces with major developments. And there's a way of doing it through statistical data which is used to project the values and the interests of future residents. So it's not something that suddenly emerged that you've got to involve future residents. It happens every time there's a huge development. I suspect it even happened when Harlow Newtown was first developed in an area where there was very few residents. Can I just also say, this report has been out for several days. It would have been far more productive if these questions had been submitted before this meeting, and then we wouldn't have to put up with this showboating.
Councillor Cutter, any more?
I will just remind Councillor Pert that the agenda runs to 265 pages. And with
And
the
they're on page 35.
What?
They're on page 35.
Yes. So I won't know until the end of the 265 pages how many questions I'm going to have.
That's not fair at all to this committee.
Hang on a minute, Councillor Danvers. I'm going to give Councillor Cartwright one more time.
If I can move on to page 37, 7.1.1 assets. The company will hold no assets at point of trade and will not trade until the scheme is awarded to them under technical arrangements. When will that be?
So in the indicative timelines set out in the report and the plan towards the end of the report, it's likely to be towards the middle, summer, autumn of next calendar year.
Trying to when?
Probably into the summer and autumn of next calendar year if we're able to deliver to the timetable that's set out in the report.
Can you give Councillor Carter the page number where that's
Yes,
set out?
that's on page 43 of the agenda papers.
So, Councillor Carter, I think I'm going to ask at this stage that if there are any more questions of detail there, that you submit them in writing when you've had an opportunity to read the report to its end. Are there any other questions? Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Just the first question I have. Was HTS's senior leadership group involved in the drafting of this business plan? Were they consulted throughout, and did they actually draft elements of the business plan?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. In terms of the timescale for this business plan, looking at the appendix, you've submitted basically a 5-year pipeline of housing. What is the timescale though for the body of the business plan? Is it a 5-year, 10 business plan? Is it a 10-year business plan? I wasn't aware of the actual timescales that were being dictated that would then dictate how this business plan would be measured over the course of whatever number of years. Is it the 5 years that have been identified as part of the appendix on the housing provision?
Yeah, I think that's a correct assumption that the pipeline is potentially the business stream for the company, yes.
So we're looking at this being a 5-year business plan. Fine. Next question I have, can you articulate to me, because I couldn't see it in this business plan, clearly business plans need to be an honest appraisal of where you see an entity going. And from my point of view, I couldn't see some of the basics around the strengths, the weaknesses of doing something like this, the opportunities wider than what the council has identified, then of course the threats. Not that there would be huge threats, but these are basic things that I see regularly in business plans that I deal with, and I just would like to get a high level summary from Simon or the chair about where you see some of those key potential issues that I've just identified.
So I think the first step towards that development, obviously we set out in the report tonight that this is the first draft of the business plan. We started to shape some of those issues in the risk register that's identified in the report. And I think the next step as we develop the business plan then will be to shape out the strengths, weaknesses and opportunities into a more formalised element of the business plan as it moves forward.
That's really good to hear. The next question I have is, clearly lots of councils are looking or have done variances of these types of subsidiaries as part of a wider group. Has the council undertaken as part of this business plan basically a landscape analysis looking at where this has worked well, where this hasn't worked so well, and factored that into this 5-year business plan?
To an extent, yes. So there have been some discussions with other neighbouring authorities that have undertaken similar developments with companies around housing development. But I think it's quite difficult to make direct comparisons because scale is often quite different from one company to another. I mean, clearly the pipeline sets out an indicative level of housing development that could be undertaken over the next 3 to 5 years within Harlow. Comparing it with other neighbouring authorities, scale of development in some areas is quite significantly different to the pipeline that we have here.
That's a very useful reply. And in terms of when you say to an extent, does that mean that there's a document in existence that's, say, plotted out in a brief way, some of where this has worked and where this hasn't worked? Have you done that kind of work? Yeah?
I think it's fair to say no, we haven't documented reports, no.
Okay, fine. In terms of some wider questions on the business plan, look, we've got this 5-year statement of intent in terms of pipeline in the appendix, but has the council, in conjunction with HTS's wider senior leadership, plotted out wider potential for revenue propositions and split that out into categories of where this could go, the exciting opportunities to actually expand the reach of this subsidiary, which would then benefit the taxpayer as a result?
So can I just clarify the question there? Are you talking about wider commercial development? Yeah.
Yes.
So I think the main focus in the initial period for the company will be about local housing delivery.
Fine.
And once the expertise and the skill sets of the company develop, then I think that wider higher risk activity would be probably something that would be considered.
Was that supported by HTS's senior leadership, that it would just be focused principally at the moment on local housing and not look at the commercial opportunities?
I think that's a fair comment in terms of the interaction we've had with HTS board members in the development of this draft plan.
Fair enough. The next question I have is it's the classic question in the business plan over enablers for this entity. When I talk about enablers, and I won't be unfair on you, Simon, I just look for 3 key examples of enablers of taking this forward, whether it be opportunities for wider partnership, consultancy activity and so on. Where do you see the council's ambition for doing something like under the umbrella of this subsidiary? Have you looked at that, at those potentials? Because they are, again, exciting competitions that could be good and beneficial to the taxpayer.
I think we're at a very early stage of the development of this business, and it's a new start business with no trading history or technical expertise at the current time, and I think trying to expand into too wide and ambitious future projection would be quite a risky activity at this stage, but there's not ruling out the fact that they can't happen in the future.
So you're not ruling it out? Okay. The wider question I have, and I was surprised not to see this, is how does the council define success for this subsidiary, and how will it measure the success of it? Because I would have expected to see that in a business plan, and I'm terribly sorry I couldn't see it. So can you just tell me how you define this entity being a success and how you're going to measure that?
So I think what the business plan includes, and it may be not labelled in exactly the way that you've phrased there, Councillor Charles, is that this is about the delivery of high quality, good homes for residents of Harlow, and that's what the initial stages of developing this business and developing its product will be about.
Right, thank you, Councillor Charles.
I just have one. Sorry, I just have one more question.
Sorry,
No, it was just a wider one, Chair. A wider one. What I need to understand, on page 37 it talks about the assets, and it's that one line that the company will hold no assets at the point of trade and will not trade until a scheme is awarded to them. So clearly in the appendix the potential schemes haven't been awarded to it yet. I mean, it hasn't even been set up. But why hasn't there been any I'm sure it's been done in the background, and I wouldn't have thought otherwise, Simon, but why hasn't there been any work in terms of financials, a bit more high-level financials? I'll get the question out in a minute, forgive me, Chair. Why hasn't there been any cost assumptions of setting up the subsidiary? Why hasn't there been any comment in here, which I'm sure has been done over the cost drivers for setting up the subsidiary, including the revenue generators? Yes, you've now answered the question that this is just going to be about local housing delivery at the outset, which is important, but it's not the only thing that this entity can do. I would have thought that there would have just been, over the course of the 5 years which you're saying that this business plan is going to cover, some cost analysis in this business plan so people can get a flavour and judge how it's going to pan out. Why hasn't that been put in here? Because I'm sure you've done it in the background.
So in response to the question, I suppose the direct answer is that work is ongoing on that aspect of the business. We've only recently acquired the financial assessment tool, and we've been going through a process of learning how to apply that tool to the schemes, and that's been very much focused initially on the schemes that are already in train and are currently being worked on this year, which won't be done by the company. They'll be done through business cases as previously agreed through HTS P&E. So we're learning how that works and developing that expertise to the point when we can actually then take the pipeline that's outlined in this report and develop that further into a financial model for the company.
So forgive me, I'm being a bit stupid here, Chair. At the start of the report, what you just said there about the software, that's the software that's doing the detailed financial appraisals and everything else. It's fine. The final question, Chair, I have is specifically over the first 2 or 3 years of this entity. You put an implementation mobilisation plan for this organisation, but I haven't seen any financials around the cash flow activity, how that's going to, how the HS Group, Harlow Council are going to interact with this entity. There are some high-level considerations in this business plan, but not the kinds of details that I would have expected. I suspect you're holding it back because this is an early draft, and that's what you're probably going to say to me, Simon. But I would have just imagined a report like this coming to Cabinet in the state that it is would have had something a bit more in there. But I would be grateful if privately councillors who are interested in this vehicle could see that kind of detail. That's all I would say. Yeah, that's great. No more questions from me.
Right, Councillor Harlow.
Just a comment really on the plan. Given the pressure that we all know we're going to face from the effects of climate change, and the fact that we all need to be doing everything that we can to reduce our emissions and our negative impact on the environment, I was surprised, and perhaps it's in there or perhaps it's within the sort of legislative requirements of this company, but that there isn't a commitment to high levels of sustainability and energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy throughout, because I think it's really essential that that is at the heart of what we do when we affect the environment globally.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. I think there is a broad mention in there, but I think you're absolutely right that that's a comment we need to take on board and add some extra detail to. I'm going to see if there's anybody else first, Councillor Carter. Any other questions? Councillor Carter. Sorry, Councillor Ince.
No, it's more of a comment really. My question was, I suppose my question was, and I was saying for Councillor Carter as well, obviously we're directors of HGS, I don't know if that we need to declare that as an interest at the start or not. That's my question. And I've got a comment later.
If you need to, you have.
Okay, thank you.
Question or statement?
No, it's just one further question on Appendix B about terms of reference to the shareholder subcommittee. I noticed...
Another page, please.
Oh, sorry, page 44. But what I'm referring to is not there. Because from the original terms of reference, you've omitted the section, the SSE is not empowered to act as a director, nor HTS Group, nor seek to accept instructions from SSE as a director or quasi-director. So that has been removed from the revised terms of reference. Does that mean you intend the shareholder subcommittee to act as a director?
I don't think that's been the intention at all, so I'll take that away from the meeting tonight and just have reference back to the terms that are set out on the paper tonight. That wasn't, I don't think, the intention, that was missed off.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Any comments? Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, as an opposition, we take great interest in the setup of a new subsidiary that will sit under the HTS group, and particularly as it's associated with housing and regeneration. Some of the core priorities on a cross-party basis that are of great interest to all politicians in the town. It is good news in one aspect that the council is following our lead and is committed to building more affordable housing. And I welcome that. And I think it's good news that they've joined us in moving with the times to ensure that there is good quality affordable housing in the town for people to get on the ladder in particular as well. What alarms me about this business plan, I'm afraid to say, because there's a lot of willing here for the setup of this subsidiary, is this doesn't, to me, strike me as a business plan in the classic form. There are a range of gaps in this business plan that, for me, worry me about the future prospects of the delivery within this vehicle. At the moment, we're strangling the remit of this entity to look at local housing delivery. And while that is important, there are other activities that could offer great potential to the council and increase value for taxpayers' money if we look at those other revenue propositions. And I would have hoped that the council in this business plan would have identified that. It's interesting that the council has confirmed today that the HGS senior leadership have been involved in drafting this and have been consulted all the way through. I'd be very interested at the next stakeholder subcommittee that I attend to explore that with them and what their rationale is, because historically in those subcommittees they have talked about making sure that we look at all the potential avenues that a subsidiary like this would present, and we should have our eyes open to those potential opportunities. I would have expected in this business plan some wider consideration of the financials, looking at some of the cost drivers and additional revenue generators, which I've already talked about. What we've learned tonight in the council's own landscape analysis of this, they haven't really gone into much detail, and I thought they would have looked at the worst and the best cases, even if they're different. The principles there are good for best practice and to learn from those. I would end by simply saying I hope the next version of this business plan builds up on the assumptions that have been discussed at length at the shareholder subcommittee about reaching the full potential of this subsidiary, not just to focus and strangle its remit, but actually to extend it out and building greater opportunities to gain better value for taxpayers' money. At the moment, the value proposition for this entity is muddled, it's not clearly defined in the business plan, and I hope in the next version it is, because this has great potential.
Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've declared my interest. Obviously, I'm a director, along with Councillor Carter, of HGS Group and HGS P&E, and I absolutely welcome this business plan. I think it's not too much of an exaggeration to say that the lack of housing is the biggest issue that this country faces, and the lack of truly affordable housing is a huge, huge issue for the people of Harlow and the young people of Harlow. Now, we can go into hypothetical debates about whose fault the lack of housing is, but the reality is we are here as an administration and we need to start building houses. And I'm glad that the opposition are not going to disagree on the need to build affordable housing. It's a certain amount of irony for me, as they like to point out, I do come from Chelmsford, where we had a Conservative run administration that weren't interested even in building affordable housing of any kind, let alone truly affordable housing. So I really welcome that they're saying that. Just to say, there was a question about the lack of ambition of this council. I'm part of this Labour group, this administration, this ministry group, and I'm very certain that there's certainly no lack of ambition from me, and I'm sure there's no lack of ambition from you as well. So thank you very much.
Any other comments?
Very briefly, Chair, only to say it's rather ironical coming from an opposition that actually opposed the actual establishment of HTS. We're now actually hearing that we're lacking ambition. The irony doesn't escape you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to pick up on a few comments. Now, I actually not only welcome this report tonight, I actually think it's a keystone milestone in this town and this authority. And I also, like Councillor Downs, will pick up on the comments made a little while ago about the lack of ambition. Let's have a little look at this administration's lack of ambition. In 2015, for the first time in 30 years, we built 25 council houses in this town. The first time in 30 years that council houses were built in this town. That doesn't describe to me an administration that has a lack of ambition. As Councillor Downs has just mentioned a second ago, 2 years ago I remember sitting in this very room having a debate about setting up HTS. And I remember the quote very well from the opposition. It's an idea that hasn't been thought out properly, was what they said, and voted against it. In fact, they called the decision in it was such a poor decision, according to them. Now they're obviously trying to jump on our bandwagon of what vision and what ambition we had. HTS P&E has proved to this town to be a major success. It has improved housing, it has improved the environment, it has brought major reward to the people of this town. The party opposite wanted to carry on paying residents' money to a private company and carry along down that vein. We had ambition, we had a vision. That vision and that ambition is success. Our next vision and our next ambition is to create a housing and regeneration company. We've already made a start. We've already registered it as a company. We've already identified on a small scale 3 sites, the Readings, Bushycroft and Lister House, that will become the first part of that project. This project will grow. This project will become a success like HTS, P&E, and I'm a bit disappointed that the party opposite can't recognise vision and ambition when they see it.
Thank you, Chair. Like all things, the administration seems to be very surprised that the opposition wish to just ask a few challenging questions about what they're doing as if it's not our democratic right to do so. And when in asking those questions, it's as if we want to throw a baby out with the bathwater. What we're trying to do is make sure that what is potentially a very, very good idea does actually come to fruition. And when it comes to HTS in the past now, you know, if we hadn't asked certain questions, perhaps it might not be where it is now. And I do seem to remember that my colleague to my left here, at the recent budget last year, did actually propose the creation of this very entity. So I don't think it's so much jumping on a bandwagon, it's about making sure that what we've got actually works. And at the moment, what we've established is extremely embryonic. So all the good words in the world won't actually deliver you what you want. So yes, you feel the passion already, you have the ambition, but you've actually got to get on with it. There's not enough detail here. If you want to get on building houses, you've got to move a lot quicker and a lot faster on this. And as we've had a very good comment from Councillor Harvey over there, there's been very, very little look at the environmental impact and what we're going to do to make sure the housing is sustainable, so that the people that do eventually move into these houses do actually have a low cost of running those houses, if we are looking to help some of the most low-income families benefit from this. So there's a hell of a lot of work to do. No one here is disputing that we don't need these houses. No one's disputing that this couldn't be a brilliant thing. We're just saying get on with it.
Right, so let me sum up then. The democratic right to ask questions. I really don't think, Councillor Perrin, you can accuse me of not having extended Councillor Carter and Councillor Charles extensive opportunity to ask questions. I suppose if I got a little testy, perhaps at one point it was because the answers to the questions that were being asked were in the report, and I would ask that if you're going to ask questions, you've read the report first to its end. You said if you hadn't asked questions in the past, HTS wouldn't be where it is now, and I'm glad you accept it as a success. No, it wouldn't be where it was if we listened to every comment that you'd made 2 years ago, because it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be here, and there wouldn't be this discussion about HTS H&R as part of an umbrella of a company that your side didn't want to exist. Councillor Charles, you said it's not a business plan in the classic form. I accept that. It's not. It's a first draft of a business plan, and I welcome all of your comments, and we will certainly be amending it. It's a draft. You said strangling the remit. I don't actually recognise that. I think this business plan gives ample scope for the future. But let's remind ourselves, HTS P&R focused initially on property, P&E, HTS P&E focused initially on property and environment services in Harlow. And it was key, and all of my discussions at the shareholders subcommittee and with outside of the senior leadership, is that we must not lose sight of the core business, which is delivering for Harlow. And we're going to come on to the success of that later, so I'll hold it in abeyance on that. However, it's always been clear, and it remains clear, that once we've got that core business secure, we will look elsewhere. And I don't think this is a time or place to necessarily announce it, but HTS P&E have had success in gaining contracts from other authorities which will bring revenue into this council and will provide benefit for the taxpayers. And once we have got HTS H&R on a similar secure footing, and we will, then we will look for business elsewhere. Do we accept the recommendation that Cabinet A notes the draft business plan for HTS, attached as Appendix A, B approves the revised terms of reference for the shareholder subcommittee, attached as Appendix B, C, agrees the proposed pipeline of house building sites for commencement, utilising RTB right to buy receipts and other funding attached as Appendix C to the report, and D, delegates authority to the Managing Director in consultation with the Leader of the Council to complete all necessary financial formalities to progress the above.
Agreed.
Thank you. So, we move on to agenda item 11, the Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2018 to 2019, the mid-year review, pages 47 to 56 of your weighty agenda.
So moved, Chair.
Thank you. I will second that. Councillor Danvers, do you want to?
Well, I only share that it shows that the investments of the 45 million, there's a return of 0.86, which is well above the bank rate, the base rate of 0.75. And once again, thanks to the staff internally, I stress, who actually manage this. We don't actually, like other authorities, actually farm it out for some kind of rake-off.
Questions? Questions? Councillor Francis.
Thank you. So on page 53, it's one of those I couldn't have done it, so I'm going to give you notes, so I'm happy to wait for an answer. But it shows the balance sheet movements on the balance sheet. But it shows net investments there of 37.49 million, which I think appears elsewhere in the report. But if you add in the internal borrowing of 21 million, that suggests a total pool of nearly, over 59 million pounds, which represents liquid assets that the council has at its disposal. Would that be a correct summation?
Yeah, that's sorry. Yes.
Any other questions, statements? Good. So, my turn. Are we happy to recommend that the mid-year review of the Treasury Management Strategy attached as appendix A to the report is noted?
Agreed.
Great. Thank you. So now we move on to the Joint Finance Performance Report, pages 57 to 74, and I'll leave that.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. I did say I'd come on to this later. Whispering. Don't let it out of this room. Mr. Casey, you might choose to edit this bit even. But Santa gets a better press than he deserves, doesn't he? Claiming credit for all the presents that lie under the tree when we've grown up to know the truth. It's the elders that do all the work. Santa just does the deliveries. So it is with this report. I would love to be able to take the credit for this good news story, because that's what it is, good news for Harlow. As a leader of this council for just 6 months, to do so would be wrong. It is, however, my pleasure to deliver it to Cabinet tonight. Let's look at some of the highlights. In the finance section, we report a 0.23% adverse variation of the controllable budgets for our general fund. 0.23% variation. I could forecast my family budget with that degree of accuracy. An adverse variation, furthermore, that my officers are confident will be addressed in the next 2 quarters of the financial year. We also report an underspend of £1 million, higher than I'd like, but caused by factors not entirely under the council's control, and representing a 1.78% underspend. But this report isn't just about the money. It's also about the service we provide. And for what I believe is the first time ever the council has achieved on or above target for all 48 out of its 48 quarterly performance targets. And this at a time when, well, to put it frankly, we're operating in what amounts to a hostile environment for local government. And well, some of the performance data. Page 65 shows customer complaints down year on year. Page 71 shows 99.65% of emergency housing requests were attended within 2 hours, up year on year. And we were compliant with 99.93% of landscape and maintenance issues, up 5% on a year. But this council won't be complacent. We regularly review our performance indicators and targets, and we will continue to do so. We will look at those areas of service delivery where we met the target but didn't reach 100% satisfaction within the target. For every one of these is somebody's personal story, and we would do well to remember that. Behind the statistics are people. The irony of success is that it should breed an ambition of ever higher performance, and we are an ambitious council. So let's give credit where it's due. This is good news for Harlow and its residents, and I hope we can all join together to thank the staff and the officers here in the Civic Centre and the management and staff of HTS over in Mead Park, and all those workers across the town that have worked so hard in delivering this good news for our residents. This Christmas, their present to us all is a financially sound council that truly delivers. Questions?
Well, thank you, Chair. Pantomime season is truly here, isn't it, joyous?
Oh, no.
Yes, it is. In terms of the Joint Finance Report on page 59, there's a very quick question, principally for Simon, section 10A. Just on the financial systems, I've looked at the explanatory notes as well, but can you just give a bit more detail over the risks around this? There is a training element here as well, I understand, from what you've said in the report on page 59 and then subsequently in some of the annotations. But when is this issue around financial systems and an outside body, an external system of support going to be resolved? What's your timescale for dealing with that?
So, the main risk is when we experience changes in the national code of practice. So day-to-day internal management, process management reporting, the type of reporting that feeds the information that's in front of Cabinet this evening is actually stable and well supported. It's our ability to be able to respond to major changes that result in additional reporting requirements, mainly in the statement of accounts.
Okay.
So we have expertise that we are currently buying in, but my ambition is to have that expertise largely within the team itself in the future. Now, it's not going to be a quick fix, but we're not expecting major changes in the code of practice for this year's financial reporting either, so that gives us a little bit of a respite over the pressure on developing those reports. So I'd expect that within the next 12 months we will be in a position where we've been able to bring in training and development to our own team to move them to a place where they're more able to deal with changes and interpret those into the reporting system.
So as you can imagine, you probably anticipate the next question I'm going to ask you, Simon. Is this an additional cost that you haven't factored in? And what are the costs of this external supply coming in? How's that going to impact on what you've already budgeted for the year? Just give me an indication of that, thanks.
So a lot of the initial work was factored into the implementation costs of the new financial system when we upgraded it. So that was part of that capital project.
Yeah.
And at the moment we're minimising the amount of dependency we have on the external support because we buy it on a day rate. So it's not a long-term commitment. We just buy days in as and when we need them, and normally we just buy 1 or 2 days at a time. So it's not a major cost, but it is a risk in terms of the skill set.
Thank you. Obviously, it will be a bit curmudgeonly not to join you in thanking the staff for all their hard work over the last 12 months, both on the general fund and in my particular case on the HRA. There is an excellent set of performance results which go to the Housing Standards Board, which unfortunately don't get reported here, so I can't talk about them either. However, it's not all good news. Page 65, where we're looking at complaints. Yes, there is a downward trend, but there's obviously been quite a spike in September. What we're not seeing here, and would be particularly helpful, I think, for all members, is an analysis of what people are complaining about. Now, are there sort of particular hot spots that we need to be aware of? And what it is we're actually learning from those complaints and what improvements we're actually making, which is referred to in the text.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Yeah, there's an upward tick between August and September, but as I said, year on year it's down, the trend is down. I think personally it might be useful to have a graph that's slightly over a longer time scale so we can see whether there is a seasonal spike that this September represents. So I'll take that on board. The second part of your question, what underlies those complaints, I think you'll find them on page 6. No? I know they're there somewhere. Is it up to the number? There we are, page 66. Page 66, breakdown of complaint category and service.
With respect, that only shows which service they're in. It doesn't actually say what it is they're complaining about. Now, traditionally we get a spike in February, March time, although we're doing that down this year, when the council tax bills or the new rents go out, people complain about it. We didn't see a spike last year, so clearly something's happened. In the text it does say, the complaints are analysed on a monthly basis and learning to take from them. So, that work is already being done. You just need to share with us.
I think there may be more detail than you're seeing as well, Councillor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you look at the bars, the photocopying hasn't made it very clear, but for each area, it's broken down in terms of performance, personnel, policy. So there is some more detail there. Thank you. Any other questions? At least so, do we recommend that Cabinet acknowledges the projected outturn position set out in sections 3 and 4 of Appendix A to this report for the second quarter of 2019 as follows: an adverse variation of controllable budgets of £141,000, representing 0.23% of gross revenue fund, a total projected underspend of £1,076,000, representing 1.78% of the gross general fund, and that the Council performed on or above target for 48 out of 48, 100% of its quarterly performance indicators.
Agreed.
Thank you. So, now we can move on to agenda item 13, pages 75 to 83. Which is the Housing Revenue Account Quarter 2 Finance Report 2018-2019.
So moved, Chair.
And I second, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Danvers, do you want to speak on this?
Only briefly. Good financial control is being maintained, and the disappointing thing is some of the garage rent income has become more problematical. Despite quite a lot of difficulties, including the rent issue, we seem to be on basically on target, Chair.
Is that a question, Councillor Barron? No. Sorry. Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Chair. I'm afraid I don't quite share Councillor Danvers' positive view on this. I have been notice of 2 questions. One is on page 81, Appendix A, which is it's very small detail. I don't envy you trying to read that on those tiny screens of yours or on a photocopy. But about 3/4 of the way down the page, there's an adverse variance on dwelling rents of £318,000 for forecast for the whole year. That equates to around losing 60 properties for the whole year. This has been a worsening trend through the year. I understand there was a degree of uncertainty over some of the forecasting of the numbers at the start of the year. Also that an unusual number of properties are coming back to the council because they which actually would require more work being done, and therefore they are vacant longer. But so it does seem, the figures we're losing. You are losing.
Still questions, Councillor.
Yes, I just that's the background to the question. We're losing 318,000 a year in rental income. That denotes about 64 properties, which seems a high number. So what went wrong?
Thank you. The actual stock held at the beginning of the year is slightly lower than estimated by 11 properties. Another impact on rental income, meanwhile, the main loss of the rental income that Councillor Carter's referring to is due to the number of properties that are held in the out of management category, which are long-term void properties, where major work is required or a decision as to their future has to be made. The calculation is based on the rent loss attributable to those properties at period 6, and assumes it will continue for the remainder of the year.
Thank you. I do have a second question, which involves slightly bigger numbers. Also on page 82, non-operational variances, there is a adverse variance of £1.47 million, which I think is quite a large number in anyone's catalogue. Which arises from a review of the depreciation calculation, which goes to drive transfers to the major repairs reserve, which then goes to fund capital spending. The question is this a one-off technical adjustment, or is it something that's going to continue into the future and therefore have a serious impact on our investment?
Thank you. On the major repairs reserve, the original estimate for depreciation is derived from the business plan based on the stock and other parameters entered. Further to the audit of the council's share, we will be aware that a review of the depreciation assumptions was necessary. This has now been undertaken, and as a result, the estimated depreciation has been amended in year due to the review that our external values conducted, which in essence impacted on the depreciation calculation and longevity of our housing stock. This impacts more on the HRA annual budgets, and all other things remaining equal will remain in the HRA business plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions?
Can I maybe just follow up on that point, I think. So I think the root of the question was, is there an ongoing implication? I think the simple answer is no, it's been a one-off change to the methodology. That helps.
That's right. But is it going to be a permanent problem in future years?
No, we've seen a one-off adjustment in a downward direction, and that will remain then going forward and be factored into the business plan.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right, any statements on this? So, do we accept the recommendation?
Agree.
Cabinet agrees and unfavourable variation. I'm going to read it out for the record against the approved HRA operational control budgets of £876,000. A favourable non-operational variance of £660,000 representing 1.2.4% of the gross HRA budget, etc. Agreed. Thank you. So, we now move on to capital programmes, Q2 finance report on page 84 to 86. I've lost my place.
So moved, Chair.
And I second, Chair.
98. Councillor Dammers, do you want to speak on that?
First of all, the housing capital programme includes works which continue to deliver significant investment plans to the council's housing assets. Upon the decent home standard, improving energy efficiency and addressing issues of compliance to statutory regulations and maintaining the programme for disabled adaptations as well. For the non-housing capital programme, Chair, capital expenditure is estimated to be 13.25 million, and you can actually see all of the details of that on page 95 to 98, Chair.
Questions? Councillor Harlow.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the portfolio hub for resources. I note on page 84 of the report, recommendation BBC was spending £876,000
on free council homes, and I'm very pleased to see that we are spending money on building council homes. It just seems a trifle expensive, just under £300,000 per home. I understand Councillor Carter has given prior warning of this question. I just wondered if somebody could give me the answer as to why they seem so expensive.
Councillor Wilkinson's answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. And I think it's a very good question, because I think in the question is the essence that these are fully disabled, adapted properties. 2 out of 3 will be, which is obviously quite critical. The cost of the properties is higher than normal, and this is due to the complex nature of the site, the low number of property types of properties. Bungalows are relatively more expensive to build as they take up a greater footprint, especially as we've allowed for larger rooms throughout to assist with mobility issues. Added to this, we have the demolition costs, the disposal of hazardous materials, restricted access to the site, and there's the added complication of there's a building adjacent to the existing end. We need to build next to an existing end of terrace property, which has added to the difficulties. But we will, obviously, I think there will be a major benefit to this town.
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to hear that those sorts of houses are being built. I just have a question about, and again, it might come back to the portfolio for resources. Just wonder what work is undertaken to ensure that we've got value for money around those particular types of builds, given their expense and the type of housing we're building. And aligned with that, the value for money question is, given that the site that you've talked about is quite a difficult site to access, have we identified the appropriate place to have built those particular houses? Were there perhaps easier places to have built them? So my question comes down to what process did we undergo to make sure we got value for money? And second of all, what process have we undergone to identify potentially the correct sites and not just gone for one that happened to be there?
Sorry, I'll answer the value for money question. All these exercises went for a tendering process, which has quite rigorous detail around value for money. So I am satisfied that value for money will be provided in building what is much needed, fully adapted disabled bungalows.
Quite happy that this could be referred to the audit committee as well. But a market value, Chair, you'd be looking at something like about 350 to 400,000 pounds.
Sorry, Chair, I accept the answer to the first.
Yeah,
question.
The other part of the question about did we go through a rigorous detail on allocating what particular site we built on? We went through a rigorous exercise with officers looking at a number of disused garage sites, and there are different plans for different garage sites in the short term, medium term and long term for delivery of all manner of projects, and that was a clear site that was earmarked that would be suitable for housing.
I do have some other questions, Chair. It's just, it may already be in public domain, but would it be possible for you to point me after the meeting in the direction of where that work exists?
I'm happy to forward that information on you. It's not a problem.
Thank you very much. I have some other questions, that's all right, Chair. My next question comes on to question 85 to do with fire safety in tower blocks, and I'm really glad to see that the tower blocks have been confirmed to be inherently safe. So it's really good. I'm really pleased to see that we're putting money aside to ensure that we're continuing to survey the work and undergo any ad hoc work that we need to maintain that status. I just wondered, there's been a carryover there. Are there any anticipated works coming out? I know we've had to make a provision because we're waiting for the outcome of the Grenfell Tower report, etc. But seeing as many of our tower blocks don't have cladding, which has been largely the critique in the mainstream press, what are we anticipating coming out of that we may have to do in the future to spend that money on?
If only I knew, Councillor Kerry, day 85 was a Grenfell. I think my gut would tell me that there's going to be a range of issues that district councils
to undertake. I think that's both strategic and operational. I think strategically there'll be some comments around regulatory activities and about joined up working, and I think that'll be quite a major part of the reports coming out. I think what I'm hearing from the Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government, I call Ministry of Fun, and that's telling me that sprinklers, that's telling me around fire doors, and that's telling me about making sure that our fabric of the buildings are safe. But I think as the inquiry materialises, there'll be a number of these things. I think prudently, both Simon and I have made some provisions for the housing revenue account in terms of contingencies. Whether that's enough, I don't know. We're putting more money into fire safety in the last couple of years, and I think the portfolio holders and indeed the council would want to tell me that the priority is to keep our tenants very safe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the answer. On page 86, we'll move on. Paragraph 13, to do with the grant that the council received to help tackle rough sleepers, and talking about the refurbishment of 1 and 2 Bromley cottages. It's nice to see that we're thinking about this sort of thing. It says there that temporary accommodation in partnership with Streets Homes is anticipated. I understand on the grapevine that work is actually being undergone at the moment. So in terms of anticipation, I'm assuming you're talking about when the work's finished, and therefore, if I'm right in my assumption, do we have an estimated time for completion?
Yes, we do, because it's a quite critical part of the government funding that we received, that we have to complete our projects by a certain time, which is April the 1st, 2019.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Any statements? Any question?
There's one question, Chair. Councillor Wilkinson has been waiting for this question for several meetings. Page 86, the heating systems replacement, paragraph 14. Councillor Wilkinson, I just want to know if you can give a specific timeline in financial year 18-19 when the WARES heating systems replacement is going to be undertaken. I'm very keen to see that happen. It's good that that work is programmed in. I'd just like to know the sort of time scale that we're looking at within 18-19.
Obviously, that's one of 4 projects that will be delivered that year, and I'm quite happy to give you on a particular project, and I can assure you it won't be done during the winter months. I'm quite happy to finish with the exact dates for that particular complex. I will obviously send that one to you.
Thanks, Chief.
Any statements? So, it's recommended the Cabinet notes the progress in the delivery of the Council's housing and non-housing capital programmes as at Q1 30th September 2018 as follows. The Housing Capital Programme forecast outturn of 19,819,000, original estimate 18,804,000. The non-housing capital programme forecast outturn of 13,268,000, original estimate 15,250,000, and B, that the cost of providing 3 council homes at the Readings is likely to be £876,000, spanning 3 financial years, and the first portion of this project will incur £147,000 in 2018-19, financed by retained receipts, 44,100, and HRA resources, 102,900.
Agreed.
So now we move on to a slimline document, the Spatial Vision and Design Charter, pages 99 to 265.
I would like to move that, Chair.
And I will second it.
Okay. Well, Chair, this, as it says at the top of the text in the report, this is a key decision, and it's obviously also a very key milestone in the development of our aspirations for the town, of which we have great aspirations.
It also says this decision will affect all wards, which it will, but obviously, inevitably, it will affect some wards more than others. The recommendation A is included in this report, but we also need to add a recommendation B, which is a procedural recommendation relating to the fact that this vision and design guide is also being considered later this week, or was it next week? Next week, by Epping Forest District Council and East Hants District Council. And so we need to include, in case they come back with some changes, we need to include a recommendation that delegates authority to the Planning and Building Control Manager in consultation with the portfolio holder for environment to agree any minor amendments following consideration of the vision and design guide by the Garden Town local planning authorities, which are the, as well as us, the other two that I just mentioned. The this document, which is, as the report explains, was developed by a specialist consultant, Allies and Morrison, who are playing a large part in the future plans for the town. They're also the consultants who are preparing the plans for the town centre, the area action plan. And they've carried out extensive stakeholder and public consultation, which is referred to in the report. And in fact, the results of that consultation are part of the reason why there's so many pages in this particular report. There's also, as it mentions in the report, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that there is a quality review panel as part of the process for the Garden Town, which is an exterior body of specialist professionals who look at every aspect of what we're doing, or what we're putting forward for the Garden Town, and give us their views on whether we're doing well enough or not. And they are quite forensic in their attention to detail. And you'll see that in the consultation there are several references to their comments where we've had to change things. You will also note that the report, the title of this report is Spatial Vision and Design Charter. But you'll notice, if you've read the report carefully, that in the body of the report it points out that that description has now been changed as a result of the consultation. It's now called the Vision and Design Guide, because it was considered that most people don't know what spatial is. Now, I'm not sure about that, but certainly it was felt that vision is enough without the spatial. As I say, this is a key milestone in the development of our aspirations for the future of Harlow and the Garden Town, and I recommend the Vision and Design Guide for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Burke, for the spatial report. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. On page 102 of the agenda in paragraph 15, there is a reference to the comments back from the Quality Design Panel, setting out the importance of giving formal weight in the planning process to the design guide. How is that going to be taken forward?
That means once Cabinet has approved this document, if we receive planning applications within the Garden Town area, we can start to implement these principles. So if planning applications come forward that do not abide by the vision and design principles that set out in these documents, the Council has more ability to be able to refuse planning applications that do not meet the aspirations set out here.
if I may. So, your meeting tonight is I assume will approve this, so yes, it will become a matter of record. But where in the process will a developer find this in terms of putting an application in? Or is it the fact that it's mere existence and approval by the council is sufficient authority?
Well, I think if you examine the reports on the consultation, Councillor Carter, you will see that all the developers, certainly all the prospective developers, have been involved in the state as stakeholders. Because one of the whether you think of it as an advantage or not, all the prospective areas for development in the garden town already have landowners identified, and therefore they've been able to be involved in the consultation. So, yeah, I mean, obviously anybody who arrives late at the table, they will be referred to this guide. But all the developers that we're aware of so far, and they cover 100% of the area to be developed, have been involved in this consultation. And have made extensive comments. If you have got the time to read the pages and pages of.
Thank you. As we saw in Judge Langley, yes, there were three major developers who actually set off developing Brentford Park, but then individual estates were then on sold to other developers. And communications between developers is probably not the most extensive operation. So, I just don't want anybody coming along and not being aware of this, and it's how easy they actually find it. But as it forms obviously part of the overall town guide, that shouldn't be a problem. Okay, good. Curiously enough, Councillor Burton, I have read the detailed page at the back. And I'll refer you to page 200.
Is the question mark coming, Councillor?
Yes, of course.
Last bit sounded more like a statement. Let's do carry on.
So, with respect, Councillor Burton has been making suggestions and allegations that people don't read these documents. I'm going to be ensuring.
I think allegations are rather strong. But we'll move on. Please ask your question.
You ready?
Can't wait.
Page 236, HG8, Parish Council, HG8, page 2. The comment is about consideration to be given to building lifetime homes to alleviate the expense of adapting homes in a later life. Excellent idea, and has been policy for some time. However, the comment is lifetime homes is now considered outdated, but adaptability of homes is included in the placemaking in the homes B8 principles. Why can't lifetime homes be the standard?
So which, I haven't got the
Page 236. It's the first line.
The placemaking homes principle is it says there the lifetime homes standard seems to be an older set of standards, and there are new standards being introduced for adaptability that this guide seeks to utilise.
Higher standards.
Thank you. Through you, perhaps I could ask Mr. Brown to forward those details to me, because I'd be extremely interested in them.
You certainly can.
Yeah.
Mr. Brown would agree. Any further questions, Councillor Perry?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Many of my questions are surrounding what the intentions of some of this aspects of this document is, because I'm in the campaign for plain English with that field day with it, because some of the language that's used within this is so difficult to penetrate. So forgive me if it says it in here, it's just
trying to interpret the meaning of the damn thing. So, on page 122, I'll give everyone a chance to find the page. It talks about the value of place changing the character of roads to streets. I wondered what we meant by neighbourhoods and villages will be largely based on tree line, blah, blah, blah. It says with a human scale. I wonder what we mean. What do we mean by human scale? I looked at Mr. Bramage because he's.
I'm of human scale. Yes.
What do we mean by that definition of human scale?
I think it's yes, and there is a lot of jargon in here, and that's part of the reason why, as Councillor Bird said, the intent was to change the title of some of the documents to make them a bit more accessible. I think human scale really simply means to promote and deliver developments that are appropriate for places where people live. So you don't have next to streets 15-storey buildings right on the pavement. You've got a development that actually, like most of Harlow, has been designed and built that is more in keeping with a low-rise development. It's intended to be a place where you've got more open space between streets and buildings, rather than a purely sort of inner city urban type environment, which would not be considered to be of a human scale, more than industrial.
Yeah, could I just add to that another clue to what it refers to, and again, these people who partake in this professional activity are liable to use words that they know what they mean, but we have to figure it out. But I think one of the clues is the phrase roads to streets, which we're trying to use in our plans for recasting the streets in some of our existing housing estates, where originally we could be quite proud of the new innovations in estate design that were brought in with Harlow New Town, although they cause people enormous annoyance when they're looking for individual numbers of properties. The fact that they're not just houses built on each side of a long road, it actually contributes to the enjoyment of the way the estates are developed. And it's to move away from roads as, if you like, places for vehicles, to streets, which are places for people and humans, if you like, instead of vehicles. I think that's another aspect that I see. But a lot of these words, it's open for your interpretation.
Yeah, I think just following up on that, I mean, it wasn't something I was going to go down really, but you hit the nail on the head there. It's open to interpretation. And seeing as this is such an important step that we're taking into the future, all of us, I'm sure members of the administration and us would prefer to know what we're getting, as it were. And I know this is a vision statement, and I know this is broad brush, but as we go forward, I think, can we make a point of placing upon people that make these documents a little bit more clearer about and getting rid of as much of the jargon as we can, because what one person's human scale is different to somebody else's. And I've got a vision in my head of what I think it means. I can't be certain anybody else, but if it was clearer in the text what we were talking about, I think it'd make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable as we go forward. So it's merely a request that the administration take that away and sort of impress that upon people that write these documents. That we don't work in the industry. Most of the residents out there don't. They pick this up. I very much doubt many people would bother to get into that because it's impenetrable. But that's just an aside point. It's a request I make to you, and I wondered if you share my desire to have this written in a more plain way.
Can I just say, Chair, this is a high-level document. As we progress more towards actually building things and looking at detailed planning applications. So we haven't even got to the master plan. The master plan is yet, so there's several stages to go. This is the high-level document that sets out a vision, and necessarily will include words like this that try to give a vision rather than a detailed technical specification which follows on later. If we tried to write a vision document that had detailed technical requirements, well, it wouldn't be a vision document. I know what Councillor Perrin is saying, and I appreciate his sentiment that you should be able to read documents, even a vision document, and know what a word means, but the actual detail, we're not going to have a vision document that contains a lot of technical specification. That comes later.
And could I add to that, Councillor Perrin, that I do share your frustration with jargon, but this is, as Councillor Perrin said, a high-level document meant to give a broad brush understanding of what the plans are, and there is an all-member briefing to be held in January on this, where you can perhaps make sure that we all understand the same thing by human scale. And
yeah, thank you, Chair. Because it's, as I say, as a vision should be clear and not opaque, and the language is the thing which we deliver the vision with. But we'll move on.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. So moving on, it seems that a large part of the document is trying to move people away from cars, and that's what I interpret the term modal shift to mean. Now, I think it's really important that any new development has really thought carefully about alternative provisions to the car, so public transport infrastructure. So what I'm saying doesn't take away from that, because we do need very good public transport infrastructure, but I don't think that should come at the price of removing the car entirely. There are other developments moving on with cars, etc., in terms of emissions, technology, moving towards electric cars, etc. And I don't think making road networks tighter, meaner, more difficult to access for the car necessarily encourages people out of their cars. So if that's the vision, I don't necessarily agree with the vision. I agree we need infrastructure for buses, we need to make sure there's good connectivity there, we need to be able to provide alternatives to the car and make sure that it works. So more cycle lanes, I agree with all of that. But I don't think making the road network more frustrated helps. And so when I see things like street design having limited...
We're still on questions.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard a question yet. Okay. And I am aware of the time.
Okay. So where I see things that says limited vehicle markings, wide pavements, etc., are we saying that we're not going to have residential roads that enable people to park their cars appropriately, and that we're actually going to make residential streets much narrower, actual road element of the street much narrower to discourage the car? Is that what we mean by modal shift?
Well, certainly the question of individual dwellings having sufficient parking provision will be set out in the technical requirements. And at the moment, their parking standards guarantee a certain number of parking spaces, off-street parking spaces per dwelling. Whether that's on particular developments which are designed in a certain way, whether that number of parking spaces is lowered, depends on what the development comes forward with in terms of a reasoning as to why that would be the case. But so yeah, we're not going to be prescriptive at this stage. We would like to see, I'm sure, developments come forward. There will be mostly traditional type developments where there's so many parking spaces per dwelling, but hopefully there'll also be innovation in coming forward with other types of development which don't require people and will attract people who haven't got a car or don't wish to have their own car. Perhaps there'll be car sharing, car hiring clubs and so on. All these things are possible if we've got the willingness to do it. But just on the question of the modal shift, again, this is one of these words that, obviously it is fairly straightforward, but just to be certain what we're talking about, and we've had a lot of discussions about this on the ambition to have a 6% a sustainable modal pattern of travel from the new areas is not something we just desire. It's actually something we have to have, because if we don't, we cannot absorb that amount of extra traffic in Harlow, because these developments are around the outskirts of Harlow, on the edges of Harlow, their transportation problems are going to be limited to people going in and out of their area. Our transport problems are going to be all those people coming into Harlow. Now, if they don't come in on sustainable transport, we're talking about public transport, cycling, walking, and so on. If they don't use sustainable transport, then this town isn't going to work. So it's not just an ambition, it's a requirement. And I have spent, as you will appreciate, a lot of time arguing this case, and arguing that it's no good just thinking about it and saying we hope to do this. We've got to have specific measures that will encourage it. And I have to say that includes the carrots and the sticks. It includes public transport, walking and cycling facilities for people, but it also includes restricting all that extra traffic coming into this town, which would completely clog it up even more than it does at the moment if we didn't get that modal use.
I have two questions. I'll say them at the same time just to speed up. Just you've outlined the process that we'll be going through before when we start getting down to the detail. After the briefing that it's likely to happen, would there be a chance for us to, when we understand the language more in depth, to alter the vision accordingly if we feel it's needed to be? That's the first question. And the second question is around density of actual housing levels that is put in here. It's talking about the fact that we actually average the density of the housing across the town because we have a lot of green space, but actually here the density, if I've understood it correctly, maybe actually more, because we're going to start comparing between neighbourhoods and we're getting rid of that averaging. So that's my two questions. I suppose, like Colombo, I've just got one more here. One more question. So it may be contained in this document, so forgive me, but I don't see anything about buffer zones between housing and major road networks. It may be in here, but if it is, could you direct me to it, please?
Well, first of all, on the question of whether this vision document is going to be amended later, no. We're approving it tonight, and subject to minor amendments, as included in recommendation B that I read out at the beginning, there won't be any significant changes. But that's appropriate for a high-level document. What is going to be possible is, as we progress through the further stages of the development, the planning of the development, that's when, amendments can be discussed, changes can be made. But as a high-level document, we certainly don't, at this stage, having undertaken extensive consultation and come back with a final document which has been, amended quite a few times already. This isn't coming forward tonight for amendment. As regards the you just
density,
remind me.
The densities.
The densities.
Yes.
The densities, again, are going to be subject to developers' proposals. There will certainly be landscaping that separates where people live from major highways. That's part of the garden town concept. But as far as the density is concerned, again, there's a trade-off, as there was with Harlow, if you like, the pact that was made with people that came to live in Harlow was that they would live in fairly dense housing areas in terms of housing density, but they would have green spaces around them. That was the deal, if I can use a word that's bandied about quite a lot at the moment. And that similar concept, which is, we're quite lucky that it's associated with Gibbard in a modern new town setting, that concept is going to be carried forward as part of this vision. So there will be varying densities, but always there's going to be compensatory landscape, whether it's in the street or between estates. On page 18 of the vision, it sets out the landscaping and design.
Any further questions? Any statements? Right, so it's recommended that A, Cabinet approves the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town Vision and Design Guide, appendices A and B, as material planning considerations for the preparation of master plans, preparation of the Gilston area charter, pre-application advice, assessing planning applications and any other development management purposes. And it's recommended B, that my councillor colleague, Councillor Purton, read out to you earlier. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So now we can move on to appointments to the Local Development Plan Panel, page 206. New Councillor Shannon Jezzard is taking on the Vice Chair of the Local Development Plan to assist Councillor Mullard in the Chair, and new Councillor Gary Dunn is replacing Laney Shears on that panel. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Good. So now, agenda item 17A, referral from full council, establishment of a religious diversity working party. Now this clearly comes under Councillor Shears' portfolio, but in her absence, a few words.
Yep. Well, I think this is fairly straightforward. This came from full council. This has cross-party support. I know that Councillor Shirley Johnson is going to join the group as well as representatives from our side, and I think it's just good news and an appropriate thing for the town.
I'm seconding it. Any questions? Any comments? So, it's recommended the Cabinet establishes a religious diversity working party with the terms of reference in Appendix A and appoints councillors for the working party as set out in Appendix B to the report, and grants delegated authority to the Managing Director in consultation with the leader of the council on the portfolio on for governance, equality and diversity to appoint religious leaders in the region to the working party. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Lovely. So, 17, and now I think we move on to the supplementary pack. 17A, referral from full. No, sorry, I've done that on 17B. Referral from, should have crossed it off, and then I'd know where I am. Referral from Cabinet Overview Working Group, Non-Housing Asset Management Strategy.
I'll move that, Chair.
Second it.
Thank you. Do you want to speak on that?
I'll say a couple of words actually. I just really want to thank the Cabinet Overview subgroup who actually put an awful lot of work into this document that made it, what we've got here tonight really. Just say thanks to their work.
Right, so recommended that the non-housing asset management plan attached as appendices A and B be approved.
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you. And we move on to 17C, which is on page 65 of the supplementary notes. The referral from Cabinet Overview Working Group, the review of local council tax support schemes proposals.
Move this, Chair. It's an unfortunate thing to do until the government changes and this iniquitous system is abolished, then we have no alternative but to do it, because we are we only keep 17% of the council tax. It shouldn't happen, but it does, and we have to follow the law at the moment.
Seconded.
Questions? Comments? So, it's recommended that the Cabinet recommends to full council that the current scheme remains unchanged for 1920 and that the introduction of fixed period awards for local council tax support is not implemented at the current time and kept under review. Are we agreed? Very good. So then we come on to the minutes of panels and working groups. So note the following draft minutes are there are none. Okay. Now I know that is an urgent business. So at 9:27 I will this. Thank you for your patience.